Welcome to Lesson 2. In this lesson, you're going to get a quick intro to the College and Career Readiness Standards. We'll talk about where you can find them, how they are organized, and how to read them. So first, let's go to the Common Core Math Standards website. You can either type the URL directly in, or you can Google Common Core Math Standards. The URL is www.corestandards.org/math. So I'm just going to Google it, Common Core Math Standards, and it's the first one that comes up, and here we are. So you can see over here on the right that we have all the information for grades K through 12, but one thing you might not be aware of is that there are actually two categories for the math standards. We have the math content standards, which are listed here by grade level. And we also have the standards for mathematical practice, or the SMPs. At a high level, here's the difference. The content standards are the what, and the SMPs are the how. So if we're using a non-math example to illustrate this, we might take something like your job. So for your job, you have the tactical things, like the specific skills you need or the responsibilities that you have. And these might change as your role evolves or as you switch positions. So with the math standards, students will be learning different content in each grade level. And that's what these content standards spell out. On the other side, we have the standards for mathematical practice. Now, these are like the things that you need to know for your job in order to navigate your role and to manage your time, collaborate with colleagues. And those aren't going to change no matter what your role is. Those are things that you need regardless. And so it is the same with the standards for mathematical practice. These are the habits of mind and the competencies that you need to be successful, and that students need to be successful in math no matter what content they're working on or what grade level they're in. So that's why the 8 standards for mathematical practice are the same for students in grades K through 12. And you can see here that they're things like making sense of problems, persevering in solving them, reasoning abstractly and quantitatively, constructing viable arguments, modeling with mathematics, using tools, attending to precision, looking for and making use of structure, and looking for and expressing regularity in repeated reasoning. So those remain the same. Okay, so let's talk about the different content standards then. So here, if you click the introduction, you'll see they have an example of how to read the grade level standards. And so there's different categories, and as you drill down, we have these different layers here. So there's domains, clusters, and standards. So starting at the domain level, these are the biggest category of standards. They're the largest group, and in the domains are groups of related standards, as you can see here. Now, that's not to say that standards from different domains cannot work together, but it's just kind of how they've been grouped in the largest category. In most grade levels, there are 4 or 5 domains. So if we go over here to grade 1, for example, you'll see there's 4. Operations and algebraic thinking, number and operations in base 10, measurement and data, and geometry. In 5th grade, we have 5. Okay. Next, we have clusters. So as a parent, I actually think that clusters are like the Goldilocks for you guys. It's like the just right level for you to focus on. What I mean by that is that the domains are probably too high level because there's so many standards within the domain, and at the standard level, it can get pretty far in the weeds. So I think if you read the cluster language for each of the 4 or 5 domains that your child is in, you'll get a pretty good sense for what students are expected to learn. All right, so one more time, within the domains, standards are grouped into clusters. Now those summarize groups of related standards. So again, if we go back to grade 1, we see the 4 domains, we could click into one of them, and the cluster headings are here in bold. So you see how there's a lot of standards, but there's only 4 clusters in this domain. So if you just read those, it'll give you a nice overview of what the work of the grade is in that domain. All right, then you have the standard level. Standards are the specifics. They define what students should understand and be able to do. So in my mind, read those if you want extra credit. Feel free to read all of them in your child's grade level. But as I already mentioned, I don't really think that that's necessary unless you are like full on homeschooling your child. But instead, I would just keep them as a reference. And if you have a specific question about something that comes up, you could go and look for it, but I would really probably just stick with the cluster level. And in case you're curious about what the codes mean for the standards, I can show you that too. All right, so let's go back to 5th grade, look at fractions. So you can see here, this is the standard code. You can ignore all this part in the front. It's just saying it's Common Core math. You know, that's a content standard, not the standard for math practice. This part here at the end with the numbers and the letters is really the code. So the first number is the grade. So this is 5th grade. The set of letters is the domain. So number and operations fractions. So that's the NF. The next letter is the cluster. So this is cluster A because it's the first one. Next one would have a B. The next group of standards would have a C. And then the standards, the last number is just the standard number. So we have 1, 2, 3. So yeah, they're just, all they are is simply the grade level, domain, cluster, and standard strung together. Again, you probably don't need to know all of that, but if you are searching for extra problems or something like that for your child, it can be helpful to search by the standard code if you know what you're looking for. All right. So then, how will you know if your state aligns instruction to the Common Core standards or specific state standards? You may know that already, or you may not. But it should be as quick as a Google search by just typing in your state name and math standards, or you can take a look at the Department of Education site for your state. Now, the spoiler alert here is that most of the state standards are actually very similar to the Common Core standards. So whether or not your state is officially a Common Core state, the standards are very, very similar. The main differences are usually just a slight change in the order of the standards or the coding, with possibly a few additions or deletions. So in some cases, they'll have, you know, like Louisiana has an LA for Louisiana in the beginning, and I think they've changed some of the cluster letters to numbers or things like that. But the content and what students are learning is really basically the same in most states. Okay. Finally, I want to mention that the standards describe what students are expected to know at the end of the school year. So please don't worry when you're looking through these or if you're reading the standards and you think, my kid does not know how to do this yet. That's perfectly fine because it's not the end of the year. And guess what? It's okay even if it is the end of the year and they're still working on it. We all know that learning is a progression. Math is a progression. And in fact, when they wrote the standards, they started by creating the progression of learning. And then they spliced it into these grade levels. So, and they did that because they had to. They had to for teachers to be able to know where to focus in a specific grade level, and for curriculum providers to align the content, and for assessment providers to write items for the grade levels. But every math educator knows that it's not it's not the case that every student is in the exact same place at the same time. And so the worst thing you can do is put pressure on kids to learn content more quickly. Pressure causes anxiety, and anxiety interferes with learning, so it actually ends up backfiring. All right, so now you know how to find the standards for your state and how to read them. We're going to talk next about the 3 important categories that the standards fall into. That's up next, so I will see you in the next video.